Welcome to In Conversation With, where I get to talk to my favorite artists, esotericists, writers, organizers, spiritual and creative workers, and people who I think are doing really interesting shit in the world. Today, I have the great good fortune of being in conversation with Ki Martinez. Ki received their training in the UK at the Sea School of Embodiment in 2020, becoming a certified embodiment coach, as well as a certified sexological bodyworker. And Ki is, in fact, a member of the Worldwide Association for Certified Sexological Bodyworkers. Today, they specialize in working with growth-oriented people of all genders, erotic explorers, creatives, helping professionals, adults with anxiety, and folks suffering from the effects of trauma. Ki is also a somatic anti-oppression practitioner and educator, teaching courses on somatics for social justice with both and collective. And prior to this work, Ki was a community organizer and facilitator in leadership development. Their focus was coaching social change makers and creatives looking to lead value-driven lives. Even in that work, they encountered the importance of embodiment and somatic practice for creating real change. Ki holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Loyola University in Chicago, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Ki, welcome to In Conversation With. Thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Shay. It's an honor to be here.
And we're going to check in. I just want to say, just from the giddy up, that I'm so excited for us to have an actual conversation, because although we've been in a lot of Zoom rooms together, I think this is going to be our first extended exchange, and I'm very excited for it. So I guess I'm already starting my check-in. I'm excited to be here, and I've had a really lovely day. And what about you? What is the quality of your body, heart, mind in this moment?
I'm right there with you. Really excited. Looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it all day. Yeah, and I'm also coming in from what has felt like a really rich, good day. And I resonate with that, Shay. We've been in a lot of conversations that are within various containers. So I'm looking forward to a little more of a free-flowing conversation with you.
Yeah, I will say, well, how do we know each other and how do we meet was the first experience that I had with you was when you facilitated the Somatics for Social Justice course for white folks through both and collective. And I was referred to that quite enthusiastically by someone I had worked with in the Finding Freedom 5-week course. They told me about your course. And that was where I first met you. And I should say, I just remembered this. There was a homework assignment that I did on the phone with you because my check-in partner was away or something. And you said in the course of that phone call, you should do a podcast because you have a really nice voice. So this is all partly on you. I feel like you got me started with that. So that was my first experience. And I just want to say something that I feel like has been a thread throughout the spaces that I've been in with you is that you create really good containers. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about where you learned how to do that and what that means to you. And during the course of this, we can just pick up threads of all the other different things that we've done together.
Oh, Shay, first off, thank you so much for that compliment. Wow. And bringing me to that moment, that conversation where I was like, yeah, you and a podcast would be a great marriage. Yeah, it's an interesting question about the containers and where I learned, because I think it's a mix of things. I was actually reflecting on this. One of the many things I host is a grief support group. It's a peer support group for grievers. And I was processing this as I was reflecting on some loved ones who I've lost, that they were the first examples to me of a container of inclusion and a container where love is felt, where belonging is exchanged, where care is exchanged. And and is woven into the way things are set up. Yeah, so I think of my tia Kula and her husband, my tio Tasso, who were the hosts of so many family gatherings growing up. Yeah, there's just so many. Almost all of our holidays growing up were at their homes and or at their home, and they were married. And yeah, there was just like laughter in the air and food on the table, but also just a sense that people really wanted to be there.
Mm.
And I think now as an adult, I look around and I'm like, wow, I'm hosting this and I'm hosting that, I'm facilitating this and I'm facilitating that. And it brings me to some of that same delight and pleasure in looking around and seeing people getting to be themselves, getting to bring all of themselves, getting to be seen, getting to be enjoyed, getting to be supported, cared for. And so I think those are my first examples, honestly.
Mm.
It's something that I aspire to. Is like, how do we operate in a space such that it feels like we're coming home when we're there?
Well, I want to say, I feel like you do an amazing job of that. And I mean, you and
Mm.
I have never met in real life. I'm talking about like the spaces that you create online and
Mm.
the way that you just sort of described how you come by that. That's really what you're up to. That was my
Mm.
experience in, so the first course I took with you was Somatics for Social Justice. And that was the first time I'd ever heard the term unapologetic naturalness. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that blew my mind. I think about it all the time. And as I lean into my weirdness, as I
Mm.
approach, my approach being 50, I'm just kind of
Mm.
like, yeah, this idea, I think that I really was obviously conditioned in school, but also very much my training at the monastery was about sort of sitting still and paying attention. And, a certain way of being in one's body and in one's attentional space that needed to look a certain way to be acceptable.
Yeah.
And I've learned that, you know, there are other ways of being that allow me to be a lot more present to my own experience of my body and my emotions, um, that are different than that. And so I feel like the way you created that space gave me a taste of that. And then, once a person gets a taste of that, it's like, okay, what are you up to next? And then,
Mm.
there was the sexual healing support group, which I got to attend for many months. That was an amazing space. Is it okay if I just pull out a piece of that, of something that you did as a facilitator that like
Sure.
blew my mind? And so that was the first place that I heard someone say, like, okay, well, we're going to structure the time like this. Here's the theme or the question, journal about it. We'll share out about it. And then you can say, if you want, what kind of feedback you want, if any, and, resonance, advice, coaching, or nothing, or silence. And I've been in conversations with people who are facilitating groups who are concerned about like crosstalk. And I'm like, actually, here's something that, I learned this from. And it's such it felt like a revelation. And now it just feels like, oh my gosh, that's so
Mm.
helpful to be able to decide how you want to be received. Um, yeah, so I'm just like, these are just some examples of things that you've introduced me to through your spaces that have now become woven into my own work. And I always credit you, where it
Mm.
comes from. And so I really do appreciate the way that you, not just hold space, but around things that are typically and culturally difficult to talk about. Um, Whiteness, structural issues, oppression, how that shows up in the body, what to do about that. And then also like sex and sexuality, gender. I mean, you go right into the like, deep stuff. And, I'm curious where that comes from.
Hmm. Wow. I'm loving your question, Shay. Oh, where did that come from? Part of me thought about as you were talking, I was like, is that like a what is it, Chiron oh, in Scorpio? Is that
Is that where
what
you
the
have Chiron? Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. That's that says a lot. Yeah.
I'm not like very knowledgeable about astrology, but when folks have mentioned about that to me, I'm like, hmm. It's also where my Venus is. Um,
Same.
yeah, so there's like I don't know. I guess I've always been drawn to authenticity. I'll say this too, my family of origin, they're immigrants. They're all immigrants. My father's side are Mexican, my mother's Greek. And especially growing up with a single mom, um, I got a lot of the Greek. And Greek folks tend to be really direct, and it's not insulting and it's not wrong or taboo to talk about things in direct manners. And yeah, I don't know how much of it was the culture or the quirks of my mom, but I felt like I was exposed to a lot of like people being very honest. Um, and so then when I later learned white culture in places like college or church or different spaces that I visited, I was surprised by how much doesn't get talked about or how much
Mm.
we're not supposed to be direct about. And I had to learn, the hard way through like getting weird looks or kind of being excluded because it wasn't appreciated how much I wanted to talk about things, all the things. And I I don't know, I just find I'm remembering now as you were talking something else that came to mind. It's like I'm really drawn to authenticity. I'm really drawn to spaces where we can unmask,
Mm.
where we can stop putting on the performance. And so these containers, when I'm creating them, it's like I just want to breathe in and feel free. And I want others to feel that too. And yeah, there aren't a lot of spaces in this world that the world I'm living in around me where it's there's a safe enoughness to do that and or permission or where it's appreciated. So yeah, I think for me, part of it's just wanting to be able to feel free to be myself. That
Mm.
phrase, unapologetic naturalness, like I made that up. That was just me trying to describe what does it look like to exist in a body and live as though you have a body and it comes with its needs and limits. And we're not going to ignore those for the sake of appearing normal. We're not gonna make ourselves smaller just so that other people can, I don't know what, fill in the blank. But for me, yeah. And I remember being a teenager, a memory that just popped up is like, was like being embarrassed by my mother because there were things that she did that felt like she's not noticing that that's too real or that's too, there's
Wow.
she was too comfortable in public space and not self-conscious enough or not limiting herself enough in the ways that I saw other people doing. And I just felt like we don't fit in when you do that. But I don't know. Now I'm like, my mom was so cool. She just was being herself and didn't give a crap. And I want to honor that. And I also feel like as I get older, I get freer and I'm shedding these layers of concern about what it looks like to do whatever. And I want to be free and I want others to be that too.
Mm. I so feel that in your spaces. You said in Somatics for Social Justice, in relation to unapologetic naturalness, you said, "Don't abandon yourself in order to appear normal." And I was like, "Oh my God!" I was emotional hearing that because the number of times I have, and appearing normal to who, for what, really.
Right, right.
And I think that normalcy, the illusion of normalcy, normalization of what should not be normalized
Yeah.
is so much a source of suffering, I think,
Mm,
in our
mm,
culture. And I think that I think so much in my own work, and I said this actually in our sort of closing session for the training you and I just did for the Wheel of Consent, that the way we do something is what we're doing.
Mm,
And and I think that what you're doing, that there is a total integration of the way you do what you're doing and what you're doing that makes it feel real to me. That's what makes it feel safe to me,
mm,
is
mm,
that there's not a disconnect between what you're saying we're doing and what we're doing.
mm,
um, and so I think that's really powerful to be able to
mm.
embody that whole situation.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious what actually sent you on your sort of somatics and embodiment journey, like what sparked that?
Yeah, so I'm a survivor in many respects. I have complex PTSD, and I've been in therapy, in and out of talk therapy most of my life. And it wasn't until I experienced somatic therapy that I felt a real significant shift and understanding and relationship to my experiences. Um, and that was only in 20, I don't know if it was 15 or 16, that I started with a somatic therapist, but it was such a game changer. Um, really changed the way I related to myself. And so that always stood out to me. I did that for 2.5, 3 years. And yeah, and I came back to it after a year at what I thought was my dream job. I got burnt out. I took some time off to focus on grieving. Um, and in that time off, I realized a lot of the people I care about, a lot of the people who come into my life and who I fall in love with or want to support with all my being, they have trauma. And I want to help. I want to be able to help people like that. Um, and of course I have it too. I've been working through it. And so I thought, for me, somatic practice really unlocked and shifted things. So that's a pathway. There's something there I want to offer. Um, yeah, and I had hired a somatic sexological bodyworker also in 2017. And even just 2 sessions with them, or even the first conversation, the intake conversation,
Mm,
I just remember feeling like, whoa, whoa, just feeling like something was opened, I felt like my worldview was being shifted. And that always stayed with me too. I was only at that time able to afford working with this person for so long, but during this kind of sabbatical where I focused on my grief, it came back to me. I remembered and I was like, what if there's a path there? I'm really passionate about liberation and specifically helping people move toward an understanding of their own power,
mm,
um, to to do what they want, to live into their values, to pursue their greatest desires for themselves, um, and in their relationships and in their communities. And I thought that's partly what somatic sexological bodywork did for me, was to unlock a sense of my power to say no. Speaking of, the wheel of consent, that was a mind-blowing
mm,
session with my somatic sexological bodyworker, was just talking about the spectrum of responses, right? That not everything falls into a yes and a no bucket. There's a lot of gray between yes and no.
mm,
Um, and we feel that in our bodies. And what does it look like for it to be okay for things to be a maybe or an I don't know? I need more information. And what if we could be more comfortable with that in our bodies and sit with what it takes to understand our maybe more? These are just some examples, but all of that stayed with me, and I realized, okay, this is, and because I like the realness of conversations about these things that we're not supposed to talk about, I was like, yeah, I totally want to be a somatic sex educator. Absolutely. Like, throw me in. I've been leading that conversation in my friend group for ages. This is nothing
Mm, mm.
new.
I love that. I really feel like our Venn diagram overlap is like liberation, like living a life in alignment with your values and like in accordance with your deepest desires. I feel like that is definitely like what we're both up to from our particular areas.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious if you could say a little bit about what the training is and like what the practice is for a sexological body worker.
Yeah. So I studied with a school, as you mentioned, in the UK. And at the time that I went through the school, it was meant to be an 8-month program, most of which would be online, and um, 2 10-day intensives
Wow.
in the UK. Um, However, I started my program in January of 2020.
Wow.
So our first intensive, which was set for March, got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back until I ended up being in this program through September of 2021.
Wow.
Which I just want to shout out the school for doing such an amazing job at holding us through so much uncertainty and also creating more and more for us to engage with over that long course of time. They were really aware of like, in order to truly learn this, we need to be practicing. We need to have it in our bodies. And so they kept hosting calls. They kept, we took maybe a very short season off where we were like, things are too uncertain. Let's just wait. But we were meeting throughout the pandemic. And I think that was a huge part of my mental health through the pandemic
Wow.
was this course and this coursework because it was inviting us again and again back to our bodies, back to the present moment, back to our needs, back to our desires, back to our limits. These awarenesses that like really kept me feeling a sense of well-being. And I not to say I didn't struggle with dissociation and other things, that these things came for sure with the tremendous fear and uncertainty of a global pandemic, but there was also just so much resourcing that I was able to get in that program. So I know that that's not answering the question of like if someone else wants to do this, that's what they're going to go through. But
Yeah.
for me,
You had a unique experience
that's
for
right.
sure.
For me,
Yeah.
it was almost 2 years long of together studying, um, lots of reading, lots of watching videos, lots of calls, a lot of practice calls and mentorship and pod work, so work in groups. And honestly, the majority of the education, or I'll say at least 50%, was learning about our own sexuality, our own, how does my erotic system work? How does
Wow.
my body work? How does my arousal work? What kind of touch do I like? What kind of um, things support me to feel connected to myself so that I could have the embodied experience, right? Of like, oh, this is what it means to be grounded. That's what it feels like when I'm not. This is what it means to be um, dissociating or disconnected. This is, and so to be able to track all of that, and we had to talk about it. That's the thing. We got to learn about how to notice it and then talk about it and then keep kind of going back in. It was very, very much like um, a lab. It was all a lab on our own bodies and sexuality and eros. And I think then that set the foundation for us to then talk about what does it look like to support others to just to get to experience some of what you've just done, that deep
Oh,
dive
wow.
into yourself.
Wow. 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 Oh, that was so beautifully framed. I'm like, you're selling it. I'm like, that sounds incredible. So it's like you are learning all of this about yourself
Mhm.
and practicing and integrating and further embodying and getting feedback and all of that to ultimately be able to work with other people to do the same thing.
Exactly.
Wow,
Yes.
it sounds so so much potential for, you know, empowerment and liberation. I mean, our erotic energy is our aliveness, basically. So,
Yes. Yes.
and that was something that I felt like I explored a lot in your support group was,
Mm,
kind of coming out to
mm,
myself and to the
mm,
group as, you know, I'm intentionally celibate at this point in my life. And yet I
mhm.
feel like my erotic life is more juicy than ever.
Yes, I remember
And
you saying that. So
yeah,
good.
and it's like, wow, we really do put it in such a box,
Mm,
of
mm.
like,
Oh
this is
yeah.
what you do with that energy is you like give it to this one person in this one way. And it's like, wow, no wonder that never worked.
Shay, I've never masturbated more in my life than when I was in this program. Our homework
Blessed
was
be.
to our homework was erotic self-exploration, erotic self-touch, and they gave us lots of different things to try on, but mostly it was noticing, watching, experiencing ourselves and tracking and yeah, pushing our edges or kind of realizing what's there, using that energy, right? Feeling into what's possible.
Yeah, really like expanding the canvas, as it were, which is a phrase I got from our Wheel of Consent training. And what an incredible thing to go through during lockdown and the pandemic is like, okay, like you can't go anywhere, you can't be with people, but you can do all of this erotic exploration with yourself. Like
That's
time
right.
well spent, Ki. I love that for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel that way.
Yeah, that's
I feel very
amazing.
lucky.
And how is it as sort of kind of a vocation or a line of work, working with people in this way? Like, what is that experience like for you?
Mm, mm. It feels really sacred, Shay.
Yeah.
It feels really, really sacred. Yeah, I don't know any other way to put it, but um, I just feel honored. Every session I have, I sit after and I just let myself feel that, let myself sit with, wow, these people are taking action on what they want for themselves in the face of things like shame, things like that it's taboo to be talking about, things like fear, things like a history with violence or trauma, and just the scariness around confronting those things. So I feel so impressed by my clients. I feel so impressed with my students. I feel so grateful to get to accompany them in these things. It's just like, wow, what an honor. I have like an amazing job. I can't believe this is my job.
Mm. Isn't it the best? I love that you're in your 30s.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that you have found that. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I found that. So I love that you're having
Mm,
that experience. There's nothing better than like having work that is actually medicine and
mm,
nourishing for
mm,
oneself.
mm.
And, I love what you're saying about, I think this other Venn diagram that we have is the braiding together of spiritual work and political work in the sense of having a structural analysis of like what impedes our liberation? Where does this trauma come from? What are the conditions that we live under that cause people to commit violence or be victims of violence or experience shame or all of the things? And, there's something about being able to, as Dana Lynn Knuckles, who's an astrologer who I really love, talks about if you're not naming, capitalism and white supremacy and misogyny and so on and so forth, ableism as the source of people's suffering as a spiritual practitioner, which I consider you to be. I mean, you're working with people's erotic energy and sexuality. I mean, is, that's as sacred as it gets,
Mhm.
that if you're not, as a practitioner in that vein, naming those things for people, how can you address their, or be with them in the process of liberation without naming that. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, like how that functions for you. Is that something that you do with people in sessions? Like, how do you kind of weave that into your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll say in my client work, my one-on-one or couples work, an analyzing is not, it's not the center of what we're doing, right? We're more so in conversation with the body, in conversation with our habits, in conversation with um, our parts, right? Uh, but it feels so important to name those systems of oppression that are operating in our society because they rear their ugly heads in what people, how people interpret what's happening in their body. And they also are very much the cause of some of their experiences. And so it feels really important to bring that in, whether that's to support alleviating that person from so much individual responsibility for why it is they, for example, are stuck in a pattern of low self-worth, um, or not naming their desires or not saying no when they are in the face of an experience they don't want to have. Um, and also in claiming the responsibility and the power that they have in in the face of not perpetuating those systems, right? Not agreeing to them, not going along, making decisions with an awareness of what's possible and that we can actually divest and walk away and make choices differently. And so to me, if we don't name those systems, we're not actually aware of our power. We're not aware of actually the chessboard, right? How do we play? Well, you need to know what's at play. And so those systems are really important to name. And not everybody who comes to me realizes that I've got a political kind of analysis to offer, but I've never had anyone, you know, I think no one's ever surprised, and it's always within context, right? I'm letting it arise because it's with them already. It's in their
Mm.
body. It's manifesting through their lived experience. So then we can talk about it.
Oh, that's so good, Ki. I love that because, I do different work with people. And the way you're naming how it comes in, that people can get very stressed about like, why am I this way? Why can't I? Why is it so hard for me to like know what, and it's like what you're saying about like showing them how the chessboard is set up. It's like, this is not a you problem. And what you do is an intervention, a subversion, you know, a radical disruption of the game.
Yeah.
I just think I just love the way you frame that because it feels so true for how I also talk about it, is that it's it's um it's not a speech, it's in context of like someone suffering. I think it does take, for me, I found it tremendously motivating to know that like the things that are difficult for me are not just about what my mother did. I'm using air quotes because, mothering under patriarchy is such a setup, that it's
Yeah.
really so much deeper than that. And
Yeah.
that any little, anything, any thought, word, or action that, plays the game differently, toward liberation is liberation itself,
Mhm.
actually.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the Pleasure Activism Book Club, which you hosted in the fall, and it was amazing.
Mm.
I had read that book when I was still a monk, and it was so amazing to kind of return to it. What an amazing group of people were in that
Mm.
group. And you just brought so much. There's something about reading a book together, being asked questions, being asked to reflect, to be able to share out with other people, to hear how other people are experiencing the text. And also just, at a very high level, prioritizing pleasure as, yeah, a very important ingredient in liberation was amazing. That was an amazing
Mm.
experience.
Yes.
And I understand that you are possibly in the new year going to be doing some more. Is it going to be similar or different texts, or what are you going to be up to
Yeah,
with that?
yeah. I want to shout out Adrienne Marie Brown, the author
Ah,
of that book, if anyone's wondering, what are they talking about?
thank you.
Um, Adrienne Marie Brown is amazing. And yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably at some point return to pleasure activism for folks who weren't able to make it and were interested. But absolutely, I am looking at doing this again. What I've got in mind for the start of the year, at least, on the horizon, is one with Kai Cheng Tom's I Hope We Choose Love,
Mm,
and one with Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are. And these
beautiful.
are slightly different texts, right? But um, yeah, I really love hosting these reading and practice spaces where we really get to engage somatics and a text to support us in embodying and navigating what this author is inspiring in us. And it just feels like a step deeper than just talking about it. So I love
Indeed. Indeed. Ooh, that's exciting. I can't
that.
wait.
Yeah, and I want to say I'm open to more book recommendations for this. Like, if you've got books that you're like, I want to know what it means to embody this, and it feels in step with liberation and what we're talking about, send them my way. I'm open.
Okay, I love that. Do you know if the sexual healing support group is also going to be continuing next year?
Yeah, yeah. So it will be continuing. I'm just going to shift it a little bit in the sense that I want there to be more than one space. And I'm going to have one space dedicated and exclusively for BIPOC, people of color, and one space exclusively for people who are LGBTQIA and or curious or questioning. But yeah,
Amazing.
we're going to continue to gather and really uplifting, um, building community, sharing supportive resources, and kind of what you said, like resonance and really the humanization in the face of the things that are hard for us.
Mm.
And I just feel like there's no context like community space to obliterate shame. There's
Ooh,
nothing like the witness of a group of others to the things that are hard for you to say or to name, um, for shifting reality. I just think there's nothing like it. So those spaces, I just love how much we're honestly we're creating belonging. We're just cultivating belonging with one another and creating more space for how we're human and all the things that are hard about that. And I love it. So we're going to do multiple. I'm going to have two groups in the new year.
I love it. Cultivating belonging and obliterating shame. Folks, what else do you want? I love that.
Hmm.
Before we move to the quick fire round, I'm just curious if there's anything else that you want people to know about that you're up to, or just anything else that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I have a deep interest in starting an interview project. Um, it, essentially, I want to speak with folks who've done this work, who've been students or clients of somatic sex educators or somatic sexological body workers. So whether that's my clients or folks out in the world who've done this work, and I want to collect their stories and I want to share them with the world, whether that's in a collection like a book or maybe eventually my own podcast. Um, I just get feedback from my clients that's so inspiring and beautiful, and and several of them have said they want to share their story and they don't know the platform. Um, so that just with that repeated feedback of like, wow, this has really changed my life, and I don't, and nobody even knows about this, or like no one in their lives seems to know what they're talking about when they talk about it. I want to put a spotlight on this field. It is a newer field, it's very much at the forefront of, in its own way, it is a frontier. And so, um, and then there's a Netflix show where people, are getting a taste of what this work is. But to me, it's just one flavor, and I want to expose people more to all the ways this can look. And so, yeah, that's a deep desire of mine. And I've done my sociological background had me doing a lot of interview research, so it's also a language I already speak and would be totally excited to engage. So that's a project I'm looking at getting started in the new year.
May it be so.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you.
May it be so. I'm so excited to read or listen or whatever that's going to be. I feel like it's going to be a treasure trove, a
Mhm.
treasure trove of like things that, we can't even imagine are possible. But then when you hear a person's story, it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out storytelling.
Yes, there's nothing like storytelling. Absolutely.
Anything else before we move to the Q&A?
No, I feel good. I feel ready. Let's go.
Great, great. I'm hoping we can do a part 2 next year because I feel like we're gonna have there's so many more things to talk about. This feels like the tip of the iceberg, but it's been quite delicious.
I love that.
So the quick fire round is that you and I will both answer these questions, and it doesn't actually have to be like rapid fire. We can take as much time as we like.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask you the question first, but if you would prefer that I answer it first, just let me know that if you want more time to think. Okay.
Okay.
And what are you practicing right now, Ki?
Mm. I want to hear about you. Now that you put it on the table that you could talk, I'm like, Shay, let's do the conversation part of this conversation. Talk to me.
What am I practicing right now?
Yeah.
Something I'm practicing right now is my sobriety. And what I mean by
Mm.
that is that I'm not practicing like not using any substances, but I'm
Mhm.
practicing my relationship with substances and um, noticing how, because I really enjoy having altered states of consciousness, altered physical, like somatic states. And yet I'm aware that if I use them in a habitual way, um, they don't actually give me, it's not a good experience. It can actually start to be not a great experience. And so really practicing with what am I doing? When? What is the context? Why am I wanting to do it? How does a stretch of sobriety improve the experience at a certain point? So really just, because I can be very this or that, okay, that's it, I'm done. And it's like, that doesn't feel authentic either.
Mhm.
So I think I'm really practicing just having an honest relationship with with myself, with, how this works for me, understanding that alcoholism runs in my family and, that it's not benign. And, that's why it feels like something that I am taking up as a practice right now. So that's what I'm up to among, many things, but that's top of mind. What about you?
Hey, thank you. I just want to, yes, I love the intentionality, the mindfulness that you're bringing to that. That's really beautiful. What am I practicing? So I'm really about the contemplative combined with the somatic. Like I'm deeply into that. I love rituals of deep reflection, held with lots of space for feeling sensations, feeling shifts in the body, feeling emotions. And so with myself, I create a lot of these little containers and practices to do for myself and then also with others, whether it's a quarterly reflection. I've hosted quarterly reflection events at my home or my birthday party.
I
We
love
did one at my
that.
birthday party. um, a little different though. I really love practicing movement as process. So movement practices often with music where I can let my body express. I can move through what it's holding and what it's feeling. So yeah, I just turn off the lights and put on a playlist and I just do what needs to be done, which sometimes looks like dancing and a lot of times it doesn't. And I always feel better afterwards. I always feel
Mm.
like I've invited some shifts and movement. So
Oh, that's so inspiring. And it sounds like you're a ritualist of a kind. I love that.
I do like rituals.
Here's to, I mean, I would love to look at your natal chart at some point because I'm like, what is all this container creating? Wow. Where does that come from? I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
What or who are you listening to right now?
Yeah, so I wish I could offer you a really cool podcast, but lately it's just been a lot of music.
I love that.
Yeah, Spotify Wrapped just came out and
Oh,
they
I'm
told
aware.
and they told me that my top played artists of the past year were Olafur Arnalds, who's a composer, Ila Bamba, which is a band, Sufjan Stevens, maybe you've heard of, they're pretty famous, Reina Tropical, and Sofia Cortesis, who does like a lot of deep house music, but like beautiful blends. And that list, Kinship, Moses Sumney, and Active Child. Yeah, a lot of like deep feels
Mm.
music. So it's funny. I think my music is even in support of my process. Like helps me feel things, helps me move through things.
I might request a playlist from you for you to share a
Ooh,
playlist with me.
with pleasure.
Oh, good. That's my
Yeah.
Spotify rap is such a like I eat the same things over and over again. I listen to the same things over and over again. It's embarrassing. Um, what am I listening to? I will say that Andre 3000's
Hmm.
new album, New Blue
The
Sky.
flute. Is it
Yeah.
the flute one? Yeah.
Yeah. It's so it's yeah, it's good to have my headphones on and listen to that.
Hmm.
That's about it in terms of music. I'm listening to a novel audiobook called The Dance Tree
Hmm.
by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, I think is her name. And she writes about like medieval Europe and like women's stories, like what, fictional. Um, really kind of dark, but like incredible. So that's what I've had on while I've been
Ooh.
um, painting and crocheting and all of those
Hmm.
things. What are you reading right now?
I am currently reading The Birth Partner. I actually have it right here. Because I'm getting ready to be part of a labor. One of my dearest friends is due in 10 days.
Wow.
And yeah, just been doing, I mean, we've been preparing for the whole time, but yeah, reading in preparation. I just finished, it's a zine, I guess, called Fucking Trans Women by Mira Bellwether, which I found to be amazing. Um, Also just finished, or not too long ago, finished something called The Outside. I have it here too. Trans and non-binary comics.
Wow.
Highly recommend. And I'm really missing it. Do you ever get to the end of a book and you're like, I miss you. Like, I want more. Give me
I'll
more.
delay finishing a book when I feel that way. I'll like make
Yeah,
excuses to just not quite finish yet.
I totally did that. I went so slowly so that I could just really feel into it. But this is like an anthology, a compilation of stories through comic about non-binary and trans experiences, and I felt so accompanied and loved by it. So um that I want there to be more edition or like more. Um and I'm also reading How to Love by Thich Nhat Hanh, which I don't know if you are
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Reading very slowly, one page per week with a partner.
Oh gosh, what a way to savor.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
inspiring.
Mm.
I'm currently reading A Walk Through the Forest of Souls by Rachel Pollack. She was a tarot giant and she died this year, I believe. She died this year. Is that
Mm.
this year? Very recently, it seems to me. And this is like her book about tarot as a spiritual journey. And it's kind of totally incredible. She's was I was going to say she was a tarot genius, but she was just such a devotee of
Mm.
the tarot as an oracle, as a sort of bottomless source of spiritual nourishment and
Mm,
sustenance. And so it's been really delicious to
mm,
take that in. Um, and I just got some books delivered from Ireland today,
mm.
because that's where they're published and only available from a bookstore in Ireland, of one of my favorite writers, Mansion Magan. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Sorry, Mansion. But he has put out some really gorgeously illustrated books. He collaborates with artists and writes about Irish folklore and the land. And this book is actually uh, about words. It's called like women's words, and it's
Mm.
sort of slang words for menstruation and um, like genitals and like all the different anatomical situations. And artists, yeah, artists took the slang word and sort of the translation and like created an artwork around it. And it's just
Ooh,
absolutely gorgeous. So I've been
I
just
love
dipping into
it.
that today, trying not to get it dirty with my paint covered hands. Yeah, that's what I'm reading. What are you watching right now? It could be media, but it could be like anything.
Yeah. Hmm. I'm not much of a watcher of much at all, but other people in my life are, and they're always trying to get me to watch the things that they love. So I've recently gotten into Steven Universe, which I'm at the point where I really like it now. And also there's a Norwegian show called Home for Christmas, which is really funny, that I'm watching with some people, some friends. And yeah, I think, yeah, to me, a lot of my watching is very playful. So a couple months ago, I finished watching all of Heartstopper. I really binged watched that one. Such a cute show. I'm almost done with Atypical, which I watch with one of my partners. And I've been, playfully watching the remake of the show Goosebumps. I don't know if you ever read a Goosebumps book. Anyway, when I was younger, I loved those little like horror stories for preteens, really.
Wow. What a like we need you and I need people in our lives to be like, you need to watch this, because otherwise I'm not much of a watcher either. Um, I'm in the second season of Downton Abbey, which I didn't watch when it came out the first time, but I've been watching The Gilded Age, and I was like telling a friend how much I love the costumes and the whole like upstairs downstairs thing, and they were like, you should watch Downton Abbey. And so I am, and it is scratching the itch in the very best way. I'm like laying in bed with my laptop, like gripped or like cracking up like by myself. It's like so good. And I'm also just started watching Boots Riley's I'm a Virgo on
Mm.
Amazon Prime, which is, he made the film Sorry to Bother You, which have you
Oh,
seen that?
yes, yes.
It was, I've
I have to
never
write this
seen.
down. Someone did say I should watch this.
I mean, I'm watching it. I'm not like, oh my God, it's amazing. I love it. But I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before. And so
Mm,
I actually heard Boots Riley on the Millennials Are Killing Capitalism live stream talking about art and politics, and
mm,
just listening to him, his mind and his politics and the way that he expresses them creatively. I was like, okay, I'm going to check out this show. And it's just like, A, how did he get this made? And B, like, whoa, what a mind. So that's
ooh,
what I'm watching. Okay, what question are you living into right now?
hmm. I, I'm wondering. I think reading How to Love has been really good and challenging, and looking forward to reading more of Kai Cheng Tom's work. I'm really excited about because I'm really wondering, how do we love in the face of so much? Like, how do we love in the face of so much that's painful? How do we love each other when there's so much harm that can be done or has been done? How do we love in the face of so much that's uncertain in this world, or that's unknown, both about ourselves and about what's happening? How do we love in the midst of the end of the world, as some people put it?
Oh my
Yeah.
God. When you say it like that, I'm like, is there any other question that any of us should be living into? I'm hopping on your bandwagon. I hadn't been asking that question, but now I'm going to.
Mm,
Wow.
mm.
How do we love under these conditions? Indeed. What is keeping you up at night?
So this question makes me think of how I've literally been staying up at night, not sleeping when I want to be. Um, especially since the start of October. And I think for me, it's a desire to live into my values with all of my life and all of my energy and being. So, be that, how do I live that out at home? How do I live that out in my relationships with others? How do I live that out in my relationship to myself, or in the world right now in this moment?
Ooh. Yeah, I would say the extreme suffering of people close and far away um, keeps me up at night. And, I am seasonally off socials for the winter
Mm,
for
mm,
my mental and spiritual health. I have other ways to stay informed as I need
right.
to about the world. And I also need to really be connected to my creative and erotic life in order to, keeping me up at night, like not doom scrolling in bed is really helpful. And, but also the situation doesn't go anywhere. I am aware that,
Right.
um, suffering is happening right here and all over the world at all
Mm,
times.
mm,
And I would say all of it is structurally created by these horrendous systems that we live under. And so, yeah, what you're saying about like, how do I actually live my values in the micro moments throughout the day? In the way that I'm inside my own body and mind, in the way that I'm like in my relationships. Yeah. What is inspiring you right now?
mm. I think I'm most inspired by the people who are close to me in my life. So the members of my intentional community where I live, the other members, and the kinds of conversations we have in our meetings, or as we navigate shifting our agreements to really fit emergent realities and needs
Mm.
amongst 7 adults and another child on the way, um, or my partners, and just who and how they are in the world and what they're doing and how they're growing and working on themselves.
I love that. Here's to being inspired by people who are right here. um, I think I've said this before, but I still continue to be inspired by people who are taking direct action,
Mm,
um, who are putting their bodies in front of machinery, in front of police, in front of, in the face of all manner of um, oppression and repression, people who continue to show up and put their bodies literally on the line. I'm deeply, deeply inspired by people who are organizing to like meet people's immediate material needs when the state is not doing that. Yeah,
mm.
very
Oh, can I
inspiring. Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that. I like flashed before my eyes so many organizers I know locally doing that, and that I've gotten to participate because they've invited and created those spaces. I'm sorry, I just thought of one more.
Yeah, please.
um, Kai Cheng Tang on her Instagram shares the best diagrams. They're so inspiring. Who knew a diagram could hold so much? But if you go under her, I know you're off of social, so maybe I'll send you some screenshots.
Please do.
Um, but her capacity to turn a complex, nuanced reality into a diagram is out of this world. I don't think I knew that was a talent, but she's got it, and they're just really inspiring. So I will send you 1 or 5 of them soon.
That is amazing. That's a
Mm,
real art form, like digesting and designing information.
absolutely. And presenting it in a way that's so thought provoking and and still captures some nuance. It's really lovely.
Ugh, I love that. What has your attention right now?
I mean, definitely the genocide that's being sanctioned by our US tax dollars. And as I'm wrapping up this season of Somatics for Social Justice, this fall cohort, definitely helping activists everywhere know their power, know what's possible when they get connected and grounded in their bodies to their values, and what's possible when they get connected to each other.
Huzzah.
Mm.
What has my attention? COVID has my attention, as it always does. Yeah, just hearing from people who are getting it for the first time, really, and who are really, really sick. And yeah, that has my attention of, I'm still one of those precautious people. And I'm just thinking of, the season and people traveling. And so it has my attention to how can I stay as safe as possible, keep other people safe as possible. Gaza has my attention all the time. Stop Cop City has my attention all the time. And also happily, my creative practice is getting more and more of my attention, which feels really, really good. Ki, how are you evolving right now?
Hey, you asked such good questions. I love them. Thank you. How am I evolving? I think there are so many answers to that question, so many ways, directions I could take it.
I love that.
Just like, because I think of evolution not as like one giant shift, right, into a new direction, but kind of like the ship, right, where just a tiny degree over and it ends up somewhere else. And I think that in many different areas of my life, I'm working to shift just 1 degree or two, really move the direction of the ship. And so I feel like, yeah, there's lots of buckets, right, that I could talk about. I think I want to elevate my my new supervisor in somatic sexological bodywork and embodiment coaching, in that her name's Marcia, and she's in Portugal, and she's amazing, and she just has such a power of witnessing me and giving me, mirroring back and giving me such great, wonderful guidance in how to support my clients. And I think the ways that I'm evolving related to that is just more and more clarity, bringing more and more clarity to my offering in the world, more and more clarity to how to support my clients, more and more clarity around what's possible in this work. And it strengthens me, and it edifies me, because when I first started this work, I was still carrying such a great burden of imposter syndrome, which to me is in part a symptom of internalized oppression in many of my identities. But yeah, my confidence growing, my capacity to see that the work I'm doing is good, and that so much good is going to continue to be possible as I step in further. So yeah, I think that's a big one I'm really excited about.
Oh my God, Ki, that's so good. I love to hear all of that. And here's to the whole, change happens through repetitive, iterative, over and over, 1 degree. It's so true. There's not some like giant left turn that we make, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's to that. I think one way that I'm evolving has a lot to do with the work that I've done with you and that we did in the Wheel of Consent training, which we didn't even get to talk about. We'll maybe put that in next time, but is really leaning into my I said this earlier, my weirdness. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, what I want, what I need, what's a
Mm,
no, what's a
mm,
limit, and like really leaning into that whole notice, trust, value, communicate framework that we received in that training. Um, that it's possible to actually, when you make something so granular like that, it's like, oh, it is possible for me to notice, trust my noticing, give it value, and then find a way to communicate it, even if just to myself. So that feels like, instead of burning with resentment and blowing up, like a whole different world opens up of possibility.
mm,
So I hope I'm sort of evolving in that direction of being able to not take myself seriously, but value my experience enough to like be fully inside of it, you
yes,
know?
yes. I love
Yeah.
that, Shay.
And thank you for being such a part of my process and my learning and so many, insights and changes that, have come into my life since I started working with you. I just really am grateful to be sort of traveling through this particular lifetime with you and
Mm,
getting to be in a process of liberation together.
Shay, Shay, thank you. Thank you so much for what you bring, the ways that you color those spaces so magical. Like you're amazing, and having your voice in those spaces has just made those spaces so much better. So thank you.
No,
And my honor
Kate.
also in response to what you said. Totally my honor.
Team, my love, I am wishing you every good thing. And thank you so much.
Likewise, Shay.